Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I am thrilled today to share the stage with a celebrity in the B2B tech industry. Judith Platz has held executive positions at Approva, Oracle, MuleSoft, and Salesforce. Many of you know her from her 6 years at TSIA as VP of Research for Customer Success and Support. She launched TSIA's Customer Success Research practice about a decade ago, and she pioneered a lot of research on employee engagement, swarming, social support, and a lot more. She was inducted into the Call Center Week Women's Hall of Fame in 2021, and she is now the Chief Customer Officer for SupportLogic. Judy, welcome back to a TSIA webinar.
Hi, John. I can't stop smiling. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
I've really been looking forward to it. We've had a huge reaction. We've got a very large audience. I think they're all thrilled to see us back together. It's always trouble when the two of us are together. So I know we've got some slides to go through, but before we dive in, I wanted to just ask a couple of questions. You attended our conference in Vegas in October and talked to an awful lot of people, and I know in your role at SupportLogic, you're talking to a lot of support and success leadership. I was curious, there's so much discussion about convergence between success and support, and is this something you're seeing actually happen?
Great question. And I think it's been talked about for quite a while as people continue to figure out what customer success does. And that might surprise people, but I think people are still struggling with, the charter. And, is it owning the renewal? Is it owning the expansion? Is it being tactical or strategic, right? So I think there's still a lot of fleshing out. More mature companies have it down to an art and a science, which is great. I do think that they're converging under a single leader. I think we're seeing much more of, for instance, the chief customer officer role, and that individual having responsibility for the post-sales functions. I don't see them coming together as one big blended group. I think the charters are very unique. And I think, the focus for both groups right now is how to be more proactive, for both success and support. That needs to be where the time and energy focus is. Everyone in the company is responsible for customer success. So the team will always exist, but I think it'll be definitely under one leader who's responsible for support, success, services, education, etc.
Yeah, I see that as well, hopefully under like a chief customer officer, because they should totally get how these groups should work together. One of the scary things I see is when success is kind of the escalation point for support, and they're not really collaborating together. They're kind of working against each other, and I don't think that's ultimately the best relationship. I know you're talking to a lot of support leaders right now about AI and automation. What do you see going on in support these days that worries you?
Yeah, great question. Support really went through so much during the COVID years and made so many amazing advancements. And I'm still so proud of this industry and for every leader and every employee who did what they did during COVID. I fear that we're taking steps backwards now, and that saddens me. I know the economic, forecast isn't that great, but I'm watching these momentous cost-cutting exercises that are happening, where we're losing some of our most beautifully skilled individuals. And we're also not doubling down on the tooling that could help us when we're doing so much more with less. And I just don't want to see support do that again. I think that there's ways to balance. I think that there's ways to, yes, if we have to do a right sizing, let's say, of the organization, okay, we're all smart. We understand that can happen. but not doubling down, for instance, on tools to make the agent's life better, to make it easier, to make the customer's life better. I do question that because it comes back to what we've talked about before. Short-term investment, short-term gains. Let's get some of that long-term investment and long-term gains going back on again. And I think support over the years has just accepted always that when there's reductions, it'll start in support. And, I think we still are prepared to have the harder conversations with our C levels, right? Our CFO, our CEO, et cetera, because turning customer-facing individuals away right now is probably really not the place to start.
Yeah, I think in an on-premise world, you could get away with a little of that, but definitely, and we're going to be talking about the support experience and the impact on profitability. So yeah, making significant cuts in support is going to bite you really, really quickly. Well, let's start diving into some of our content, and I wanted to start with the conversation around customer health scores. And wow, what a polarizing topic this is. Everybody's got budgets. Everybody's looking for this magic formula to build out the customer health score. My, somewhat jaded view is that a lot of these health scores are being built to make the accounts look healthier than they actually are, or to pave the way for bonuses because Success is doing such a great job. But when you dig into how they're calculating these health scores, the largest percent is the opinion of the CSM, and they're certainly not talking to everybody at that account. And they're also looking at adoption, and adoption does not equate to value. We've all been forced to use tools that we hate, and we have to use them, and we complain about it. It doesn't mean we're getting value. So it seems like we're focused on maybe what's easy to measure and not really what is actionable. So I want to start by asking you, as a Chief Customer Officer, could you talk about why are accurate health scores so important? And are you seeing people creating actionable, valid health scores, or are you seeing a lot of kind of fake news going on?
And John, I've never known you to be jaded my entire time. So yeah, I think certainly people have created what we'll call those false health scores. But I think, again, back to what we just talked about, the economic times that we're living in and needing to make this switch to proactive. The only way companies are going to swing to the pendulum over to driving more proactive support and success is to have accurate health scoring. If you don't know what is truly going on, if you haven't looked at all of the unbiased, and that's a word I'm sure we'll talk about later as well, the customer signals from every interaction, if you're not doing that in real time, you are not going to make that move to proactive support. And so the customers of SupportLogic who have implemented, our account health score, they're seeing things now that they didn't see before, and they're able to put programs in place, people in place. So if we're still in the days of fake news, we better get out of that pretty quickly, because again, in ours, we're using a 5-factor approach to calculating the health. And we have to, as an industry, really be serious about that. It's not just, as you said, what a customer success manager might put into the system of record for customer success activities. We have to look at the trends, the escalation history, the interaction, the cadence of interactions. So I can understand the jaded part of it, but I'm going to be really optimistic and think that we're beyond that and people are ready to do the right thing.
Well, we're going to talk, I think there are a lot of barriers and complications to why some of those health scores aren't as accurate as they could be, and hopefully SupportLogic is solving that for companies. But, we've spent years now discussing why support doesn't have more visibility and influence and respect within organizations. And as you well know, TSIA data shows an incredibly strong correlation between a good support experience and ultimately ARR, long-term value for accounts. But my question to you is, why aren't companies doing the math to show within their own organizations the impact? I mean, we talk about this on webinars and at conferences, and everybody nods their head. They know in their heart that the job they're doing in support is impacting renewals, but they don't do the math themselves. I mean, why is this so difficult? And, you know, why do you see companies not able to illustrate this to their own executives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love seeing this benchmark data, John. And, you know, one of the things I'd say, there's a lot of reasons. I would say it's conflicting priorities for sure, right? It's the fact that there is so much data, and for a lot of individual organizations, this is a manual exercise that they go through, right? But for instance, when I implemented Support Logic, which I did at MuleSoft before I joined the company, I was a customer. I was able to do things in minutes that used to take days or weeks. We were able to go back to the other organizations and show where we had opportunity to upsell customers. You know, and it wasn't just a simple push of a button, but again, I could look at my entire case history in moments. And I think when we're still in the reactive place, we still don't have the right resources. I don't know what the benchmark data shows, but I remember when I was with TSIA and we were asking the question around data scientist, and did you have dedicated data scientists in support, or were you using a shared model, and what the percentage was. And it was really, really super low single digits at the time. I don't know, you know, if that's increased, but it's the fighting for the resources, the fighting for, you know, again, the tools. And then, of course, it's the data and how siloed it can be, right, in a lot of organizations. You know, support, just look at your case data. You don't need to look at anything else and draw any other conclusions or stories. So thankfully, you know, the good news is tools like Support Logic, we're literally able to just lay down seamlessly on what's already there and serve up this information and make life better. And, you know, I'm passionate about this, and yet it boggles my mind sometimes that we aren't all having the same conversations with our executive team, because we're so capable of it. Some of the smartest people I know are support executives. So hopefully we're going to just keep changing, you know, the dynamic and kind of that feeling like they're not having a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a keynote at an event last week and talked about the reluctant hero syndrome, that people who are kind of gravitate towards services roles love to put out fires and rescue the customer, but we're not the best ones at getting up on stage at a company offsite and pounding our chest about the amazing job we're doing. So we don't, we're sometimes our own worst enemy, that we're
That's
not
true.
demanding, you know, visibility for the good work we're doing. So I remember the first time I met the Support Logic CEO, Krishna Rajraja. He was in a WeWork center in San Jose, small team. And I know I called you when I got back and said, I'm just blown away by what I've heard. This company's doing something completely new and different. And Krishna talked about really unlocking the value of all of this data and metadata that's sitting within the CRM system, and nobody knows it's there. They're not leveraging it. They're not using it for anything constructive. And you know, if you just think about the massive volume of cases and the incredible wealth of information in each one, and I think it is safe to say that for most companies, support is having more interaction with the customer than anyone else in the enterprise. So how what do you find when you're introducing, prospects or new customers to the Support Logic platform? Are they really shocked at how much information they can gain from what's sitting there already? They're just not using it?
Yeah. I always say this, you can't unsee what we show you. And I had that very same experience when I made the buying decision to purchase Support Logic. It was implemented on, my stack of cases at MuleSoft. And literally within the first 5 minutes of, the Support Logic and MuleSoft team coming together, and they were showing me real time on the screen, and it was one of those moments where you're like, oh, don't show me anymore, but you can't unsee it, right? You just can't. And it was absolutely fascinating what you find. And again, your entire case queue, you can't do it. You can't physically do it. And if you think about the footprint of stress that is on our support managers today, and you and I, talked about this not long ago, these support managers are almost getting lost in the fray. We over pivoted to customer experience, and then we rotated to support employee experience, which is fantastic. Don't get me wrong. However, we have these managers now, again, larger teams, right, than they've had before. The stress, we're really still not out of or figured out the remote workforce, all of this. What an amazing gift to give to give a manager that an executive could say, hey, I'm going to make your job purposefully so much easier. You don't have to sit and read 40 cases before you get on the phone with customer ABC. I'm going to serve up information for you. I'm going to make it easier for you to coach your agents, which managers really do want to spend their time doing that. So I'm absolutely shocked, maybe right word, maybe surprised, but also pleasantly surprised, I think, in finding those needles in the haystack that they wouldn't have seen before. So it's a fun thing. It's like reading comments in a CSAT survey. Those are the surveys we all go after, right? We want the ones with the comments. Yeah.
Well, I think, historically, we've done a bad job of assuming why you get good scores or bad scores, and we think we know what customers want. We get asked that all the time at TSIA, what do our customers want? And it's like, well, why don't you ask them? They're more than happy to tell you. They're just waiting to be asked. When I first was introduced to Support Logic, some of your early customers were doing like prediction escalation, but now you're leveraging AI, machine learning, sentiment analysis to do so much more, including mining all of that content with the sentiment analysis tool to understand really the health of accounts. Could you talk about the expanding use cases for the technology?
Absolutely, John. We're still young. We're a young company, but the momentum that we have right now is absolutely amazing. And, we're focused on the support experience and really building that out as something the industry talks about. For 2023, we have some really big things planned. We're launching new products that'll strengthen our value to our customers. But one that I'm really excited about is the ability to better coach and upskill the support engineers, faster onboarding, performance coaching and quality management. That really went by the wayside a bit during COVID. We didn't focus too much on the quality piece because it was hard for managers to add, those coaching conversations in a remote way. And I know, during my time at MuleSoft and Salesforce, many of the customers said, it's just not something we're going to do right now. And yet we all know being able to coach agents and engineers is so valuable. They want it. They want to be good at their roles. And we need to find, again, how can we get them onboarded quicker and such. So that module is going to be amazing. And again, that's being able to use our tool to do that. We're adding AI signals to understand how healthy the support interactions are, because that goes to the retention piece, right? We want to be serving up for our customers the right experience. And so we can find where we don't give that ideal experience. We don't need to wait for a customer to escalate. We can find it before they do. And, you know, there's nothing worse than having to pull the "may I speak to your manager" card. So let's avoid that in the first place. And that is one thing I want support people to take away to today is let's stop thinking that escalations are just a part of life, right? And I think a lot of organizations do. They just accept, hey, we're going to have escalations. Hey, how about thinking we don't have to have any at all? That would be amazing. And the other thing is expanding to other functions. So customer success, our engineering teammates and such, right? So that the support experience can drive data into those teams to put information at their fingertips. I'd say right now we are investing so much into creating this SX space. We're going to do a lot more of that in the coming year. And I am confident this organization is going to change the face of support and how they interact. So I'm glad to be part of the journey.
So I'm curious, you know, it's not just finding the data. If you're going to move from reactive to proactive, you're going to have to change your processes, probably your hiring profiles. It's a culture shift. Do you see that their support organizations are able to make that relatively quickly once they've got this data and this insight? Can they leverage it and change the way they do business?
It comes from the leadership level down, and it comes from the support engineer up, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there is a lot of legacy thinking, right? What I'd call old school thinking. I think we have to refocus too on the metrics. We have to measure the things that matter, and we have to, you know, an example, proactive support. Would you rather see an agent stay on and help the customer with the next known issue and forget about the time to resolution metric on that one, because it doesn't matter, because we actually avoided a case, right? We didn't send the customer off knowing full well they're going to run into that brick wall. And we just, you know, stood back and watched it happen. So for me, metrics are important in making this culture shift, because we need to start measuring different things. And that's going to be, I would bet, the hardest thing for a support org to do, because we're so good at measuring everything. And we have these charts and graphs that go on forever. And yet I'm not sure that data actually does much for us, to be honest.
So we've been focusing on the support experience, but obviously every step in the end-to-end, you know, customer life cycle is a good or bad experience, and we need to be analyzing every touch point on that journey. Could you talk about the potential benefits you see from really looking at the entire customer experience, and what do you see as the most important part of a customer journey, and how does having health scores impact that journey?
Yeah, that's a lot of questions in one question, but I'm going to get there. So first off, it's imperative, the customer journey, and you measure yourself through that journey. I would say right now, besides support, which I'm so passionate about, so passionate, our customer success managers, they are so critical in this customer journey, because where a CFO might be sitting now and looking at every single spend, right, and cutting some of the spend, you know, it is going to fall back to these CSMs and their relationships in the company. And those relationships are going to matter, right? Whether or not maybe some redlining happens, right, to the renewal, et cetera. But also, I would say the most critical right now is the onboarding team. Whatever it takes to get customers to value quickly and to meaningful results. I would say the first seed of churn is planted during onboarding. If we don't get onboarding right, we've already left a taste in that customer's mouth that they're going to struggle to get over. So to everybody out there that's on an onboarding team, my hat's off to you and my sympathy to you, because there's going to be intense scrutiny for that onboarding to get faster, better, stronger. And most importantly, that time to value for the customer needs to be realized very quickly in today's world. But, the other place where, a tool certainly like Support Logic and the health scores and, being able to look again at an unbiased way at the data, feeding it back to sales, as they're working on, their ideal customer profile, being able to see, what's happened with other customers. And if you're looking and debating whether this is an ICP or not, you might find that, you're selling in a unique way to the wrong customer, right? Things like that. Product and engineering team, it's invaluable for them to see the trends that exist in the data. It typically is a product and engineering team sees the defects and the enhancement request. So we'd say what? Maybe that's 20% of the case volume. They don't see the other 80. And in that 80 is invaluable information that they could be using, making the product better, stop building features the customers don't use, fix things that support just knows how to fix. We'll tweak this, Mr. Customer, Miss Customer. Well, what if product would just fix it permanently? It's not enough to be a defect or a bug, but it's a workaround, right? We'll fix the workaround. And I'd say for the executives, understanding and being able to get to, the net retention that we want for the revenue, being able to improve the margins, tools like this are absolutely invaluable. Health score is absolutely invaluable. And the big one, today, obviously, the CFO is getting involved in a lot more conversations about renewals of products. They're looking at every single product and do you need it? Do you not need it to run your business? But it's also the IT departments. People are fighting for priority on IT's, desk. And we all know historically sales pretty much, if you're talking about making a change, let's say to Salesforce, sales wins, right? And support kind of gets deprioritized in the changes they need from IT. So again, health scoring and understanding and being able to say to somebody in IT, for instance, if we did this, we'd improve our customer experience, right? And attaching a dollar amount, it's invaluable. It changes the world. And so I think support, again, you look around this circle here, how could you not want to take that data and use that data in meaningful ways?
I have a question. I recently wrote a blog about the need for a cross-enterprise ops team, because we've been talking about the incredible wealth of information about the support experience locked in CRM systems. Most organizations aren't tracking that much information about how they're interacting with customers, and very little of it gets recorded or put in CRM, and we're not even surveying that much or consistently about the experience at every step. Do you think that having someone like a CCO who understands the end-to-end customer experience, is that going to help other organizations start tracking better, more consistent, more accurate data so you've got it to analyze?
Absolutely. It's going to be invaluable. And I think, again, the focus that we have on needing to retain the customers and the relationships, we should always be thinking that way. But again, today's economic times are forcing greater pressure, right? And I'd say times are tough, really, really tough right now. I don't know if they're as tough as they're going to be in 2023, but they're tough. But I think the tougher thing is keeping a customer happy. And we all have to own that. And for me, as CCO, their voice carries more weight. Their stick has a little more oomph behind it these days. And I really hope, to see that transition taking place throughout the industry, more in force than it has.
Yeah. So it's one thing to have this great insight. It's another thing to act on it. Could you talk about acting on the data and the link to retention?
Absolutely. So getting into, the way that we can take this data and, we have six factors we take into consideration when we're looking at, creating a health score for our customers. Those six factors are super important in looking at, for instance, the case volume. So thinking about a case volume, if a customer is logging a significant amount of cases, well, the proactive motion there might be maybe they need more enablement, maybe they need more training, maybe they need a different level of support, right? So we can go and solve an issue for them, looking at them holistically. I think the other thing to focus on, again, is making the product better, faster, stronger for the customer, taking all of the insights. Again, did they have to escalate with us? How many of their issues went to engineering? And being able to holistically serve this up. I had a customer that I did actually a presentation at TSW. It was Palo Alto Networks. They talked about the fact that their CSM spent 35% of their time reading cases before they'd go into conversations with their customers. Reading them from top to bottom, everything that was in a case, and wanting to understand, because they didn't want to be blindsided, and they wanted to understand what they were walking into. Wouldn't that be amazing? You just pulled this type of view up instead, and you can get to it, right? You can see everything you need to around the sentiment of this customer, general insights. And I would say the CCO, again, will find opportunity in these types of health scores to create proactive motions that they haven't been able to today.
So we've mentioned sentiment analysis a couple of times, and I wanted to point the audience to this report. It is a public report, so whether you're a TSI member or not, you can access it. There's a link to the report in the resources section of your On24 panel. We've received over 50 inquiries in the last year on sentiment analysis, and it is something that I think companies are really understanding that they should be investing in to unlock all of this information. And I do think a lot of it goes back to looking for more actionable health scores and where do we have a lot of information. But, just thinking about the email conversations and the case notes and the text conversations, there's so much in there. So I would encourage you to click through. It sort of gives you a crawl, walk, run on how you can start with really basics around sentiment analysis and hopefully challenge you with ultimately where we could go. Technology is definitely moving very, very quickly there. And Judy, I know you had a resource you wanted to mention as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. We're going to be doing a webinar in the new year, January 18th on Wednesday, and it's helping what we just talked about in the beginning of this call, helping, our support executives, directors, et cetera, helping them make the business case to invest in AI. Because I think that is one of those struggles. I used to present on this topic a lot. Where do you start with AI? It's so big, it feels heavy. Well, it's not. And so we're going to do a three-way with Rebecca, myself, and Joe Andrews, who's our Chief Marketing Officer. And I'm really looking forward to this. We have a paper to share, as well as really just a lot of actionable things that we can help our fellow peers in the industry do to make the business case.
Before we go to audience Q&A, I'm curious, you're talking about making the business case. Obviously, there's some economic issues going on. I am not an optimist, but personally, I think it's more of a correction. As an executive told me yesterday, it's more of a soft landing than a crash. But 74% of our members are expecting revenue to grow next year, so I think we're going to see a lot of growth. But there are a lot of budget freezes or, a lot of examination about the budget, and we are hearing that some deals are extending. I'm wondering, are you seeing it becoming tougher to renew accounts due to budget? Are you seeing an impact to pipeline or closing business?
I think everybody is, right, for sure. And I think that that is even more what I was saying in the beginning, John. I want my fellow support executives to stand up and stand strong and double down, right? If you do have to reduce headcount, okay, we understand it happens. 89%, I think, of support cost is in fact labor. At least that's what the metric was a year or two ago. And so, yes, the renewals are harder, but that's where, again, the right motions at the right times with the customers. If you start a renewal conversation 1 or 2 months ahead now, you're late to the game, right? Renewal conversations should be ongoing. They should start, 6 months prior to the actual renewal. But always, always, always be proving the value and continuing to expand the relationship. It's not about, did the customer adopt us? That's meaningless. It's about, what did we do to make their life better in a consistent way? And can we speak to that? I think that's where a lot of these renewals become so hard, because when asked tough questions, I don't know that a lot of people can hold up their hand and really answer, how did I bring value to your life? And I think we have to get better at that. And again, you're sitting on the data, for us, we just made a pivot in how we price and such. We're making it really super easy for support executives to come in the door. Really easy. And so give it a try, try it out and see what you find, because the ROI that we're seeing in time to resolution, the fact that you can reallocate resources to different things. Think about how large your escalation management team is. Think about how large or how not large, some of the teams that are doing operations for you. There's savings to be had for using tools like this. And again, this is one of those tools. You don't have to fight it. The support engineers won't be mad to see a tool like this come into play, right? The managers won't be mad. You're going to make their life better. There's a lot of tools that can't say they do that.
Mm-hmm. But you make a good point that business users aren't always great at proving value. And, right. The vendors like yourselves have got to show them how to do that and help them build that really case study. But I know that only about 20% of our members have any kind of benchmarking program for their customers. So, you've got to help them understand what to track, what to look for, show them, example adoption curves and value curves, because if you think they're going to go off and do that on their own, your renewal is probably going to be tough.
Well, and nor should they have to do that on their own, right? Shame on us if that's actually what happens.
Yeah. Well, Judy, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. We do have a few minutes left for audience Q&A. Vanessa, do you have any questions from the audience?
I do have quite a few actually already, but just as a reminder, since we do have the time left, please enter your questions in the Ask a Question box in the top left corner of the webinar player. And even if we can't answer all of your questions here live, we will make sure to follow up with you. So with that being said, our first question comes from Kim, and they ask, does having a tool like Support Logic mean you don't need to conduct a CSAT survey?
Oh boy, one of my all-time favorite topics, CSAT surveys. So first off, if you can get to your data and you can see your customer sentiment real time, if you're waiting for CSAT surveys to come back, it's too late. It's just too late. You can see sentiment scoring and such real time. So you can get to that in a more meaningful way across 100% of your cases, not just the low digit response rate that you get back from your surveys. However, I will say customers want to be heard. So if a CSAT survey becomes a vehicle for the voice of the customer to come into you and you're listening to it and you're responding to it appropriately, I think that's where maybe CSAT surveys have value. but it's certainly not the touting of, hey, we're a 4.5 out of a 5, and we see that done a lot with NPS and such. Those are not real-time numbers, and it's a small subset. So I would do some type of survey to get that voice of the customer, so the customers feel that you want to hear from them. But I just don't know that the consistent set of questions we've been asking for the last many decades is actually something that's valuable to us. I can only imagine the emails I might get now on this topic. John, how do you feel about it?
Well, we had talked before about the fact that the response rate on CSAT surveys is so low that you're really not collecting a full view of the customer base anyway. You're probably getting the most angry customers and maybe the most happy customers. But if you've got a 5 to 10% response rate, that means 90% of the time you've got no clue what's going on. So I don't know that it will replace it completely, but it definitely will supplement it and give you a much more nuanced understanding of friction points, what's driving satisfaction, dissatisfaction, so you can fix it instead of just react to it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's take another question. This one's from Doug. And they ask, if CS is getting a lot of value from support's use of support logic, do you see CS helping build the business case and fund the purchase?
100%. Yes, absolutely. I do think that this type of a tool will be, funded not only by CS, potentially by product and engineering as well. I think there's a lot of different buyers, a lot of ways to merge the funding together, but without a doubt, CS getting the value, it does allow for them to step into those financial conversations. So 100%.
Okay. Let's squeeze in one last question. This one is from Evan, and they ask, what are your thoughts around house scores with companies focused on products versus a less traditional SaaS org?
Product. So does that mean on-prem product? Is that what we're drawing the differentiator there?
Yeah, I think that could be. I can, that the sentiment analysis paper I mentioned, the big case study in there is from HPE, and it's about on-premise, technology products. So all of that data and metadata around cases doesn't matter. It could be consumer products, it could be hardware, it could be software. I think that software companies are probably more focused on renewal, but obviously there's a lot of value from mining the support experience beyond SaaS renewals.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, we have come to the conclusion of today's webinar. So thank you so much to Judy and John for your presentation today. And now just a couple of quick reminders before we sign off. There will be an exit survey at the end of today's live webinar. If you could take a few minutes to provide your feedback on the content and your experience by filling out that brief survey, a link to the recorded version of today's webinar will be sent out within the next 24 hours. I would now like to just take... Yes.
Vanessa, can we remind that the resources to access John's paper, and if people are interested in that business case webinar, lower or left-hand side of the screen under resources, to make it easy for everybody here with us today to walk away with those two assets.
Absolutely. So like Judy just mentioned, on the left-hand side, you've got a resources box, and those top two links are going to be the paper that John mentioned here, the current and future state of the voice and sentiment analysis, along with the Support Logic webinar coming up here with Rebecca and Joe Andrews from Support Logic as well. So please don't forget to click those buttons. And with that being said, thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's live webinar, Align Support and Success with Actionable Account Health Scores, brought to you by Technology and Services Industry Association and sponsored by Support Logic. We look forward to seeing you at our next TSIA webinar. Take care, everyone.